What's up, grinders? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at one of the big boys, one of the names you've all been begging me to look into, and that is Language Simp, or as I prefer to call him, Mr. Simp. So let's take a look at his most popular social media account, which is obviously his YouTube channel right here, Language Simp. So let's take a quick look at the description to try and figure out what his language claims are. So as we can see, he's got a link to an ebook, which is on his official website right there, languagesimp.com. And then we've got access to more videos via Patreon. And right here it says he's a 26-year-old hyperpolyglot gigachad and a simp for languages. So based on this, we don't know what the language claims are so far, but we do know that he claims to be a hyperpolyglot gigachad. Okay, now if you scroll down the page, you're going to basically see videos where he just does reviews of languages, language comedy. Sometimes he shares his actual progress within languages, but overall it's mainly a language channel. And then we have two links to his other channels, which are for specific languages. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at his official website, which sells his ebook. Now, this is probably the thing most people are interested in to see what the claims are. So it says, this book is your definitive strategy guide to conquering the gigantic task of learning a language, or for the daring multiple languages. I know firsthand that getting started can be confusing, and that the road is filled with potential traps and pitfalls. Now, if we scroll all the way down the page, we can find a section about him. My name is Language Simp, and I am a 26-year-old hyperpolyglot gigachad alpha male who is attractive to every woman and man on the planet. I didn't start off that way though. I, like many other humans, started off as a weak, monolingual beta who could speak only one language, although it is the greatest language. But years ago, I had a fateful encounter and a budding romance with the French language, which got me started down a path that I have never looked back from since. From French, I branched out into many other languages such as Spanish, Russian, Portuguese, and Arabic, among others. Not a single day goes by where I do not think about, use, or study languages. Okay, so far we've got a partial list of languages. We do not have any specific claims around those languages, so we need to keep diving. Now, first, what we're going to do is have a quick look at his French language channel, and as you can see right here, there isn't really that much here. There's just one video, this one right here, Do I Really Speak French? And if we go to the video section, again, it's just that one video. So let's go take a look at his second channel now, which is his Russian channel. Now, on the Russian channel, again, it's the same thing. We got one video, and it's this one right here, which is him telling you how to pronounce a sound. Now, besides this, he also has a bunch of other social media accounts. If we take a quick look at them, such as Twitter right here, again, there's no claims. It's just him being a hyperpolyglot gigachad alpha male. Again, we've got this one over here where on TikTok, and then finally Instagram. Nothing special, it's just him re-uploading videos, no claims again. Now finally, we're going to take a quick look at his Patreon page, which is where people can basically donate money to him and get, special services in return. Special services. Okay, creating important language learning content. Well, I'm not sure about the important part, but let's keep moving down. And funnily enough, if you look at this first post right here, it's a question and answer from June the 16th. You can see it says there, "Hey man, looks like Evildea is making a video on you. Nervous, excited, any thoughts?" So Evildea has been discovered. It's getting harder and harder these days to conduct an investigation without being known. Now, as I said, he does have that ebook, and if we scour through that ebook, because it has been purchased by different members of our community, we can find something akin to some claims. So right here it says, flashing forward in 2025, I now have functional ability of various degrees in French, Spanish, Russian, Portuguese, Danish, Arabic, German, Hindi, Urdu, Tokipona, and most recently, Vietnamese. So functional ability doesn't really mean too much. It's an intentionally broad definition, meaning that in some way I can use a language that I say I have a functional ability in. That could be anywhere from saying a few greetings in a non-cringe way, all the way to being mistaken for a native. In general, and especially on Patreon, I always preach that you should undersell your language levels. And finally, he says, I'm pretty good at French, and then I'm not too bad at Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, and German. then I can sort of have fun from time to time at various levels in Arabic, Urdu, Danish, Tokipona, Vietnamese, and probably others. So the way these investigations work is that my community and I work together to gather as much data as we can on a polyglot or hyperpolyglot and put that into basically one file, and then from there we work in an anonymous fashion to rate their abilities based on all the data that we've managed to find so far. So this is the document in question. You can see here on the screen. First, we've got video links to all of the different languages where he speaks them. Plus, we've also got actual interviews in there that we conducted with him after we did the initial investigation. And then finally, we've got the reviews based on languages. Now, if I zoom this out a little bit, let's just zoom out. You can see that this actually is quite extensive. In fact, I can't even zoom out far enough. But as you can see, we've got Spanish, Russian, Arabic, Portuguese, Danish, German, and then some Vietnamese right there at the end. Now, this document will be linked in the description for you all to go check out and do your own deep dive analysis if you want. So before we start trying to figure out what exactly his abilities are in each language, we need to work based on some type of common system that is known to as many people as possible. And the one we use here on this channel is the Common European Framework of Reference. So this is it here on the screen. Now, for those who are unacquainted, basically A1 level is your entry into the language. You know the pronunciation, some basic questions and answers. You can do some, like, let's say pre-memorized responses or questions. It's really, really basic. It's beginner level. Now, in the B range is what you would call intermediate in a language, and B2 is basically akin to a low level of fluency. You're able to discuss most everyday things at that level, and then C1 would be at the level where you can form sentences akin to that of, let's say, a native speaker. Now, this doesn't mean you have an accent or anything like a native speaker. It just means that you're able to form all the sentences that would be necessary. And then C2 would be like a educated version of a C1. Now, one thing I do want to note about these levels is that they are not linear. As you can see, there is quite some distance between different ones, such as the B2 and the C1. Now, before we start putting his languages on that framework, I want to show you a couple of video clips of him talking about his claimed ability in the languages, because I think realistically this is a great representation of what he presents to the public overall, and also what most people should present.
So which languages now do you speak? And you don't have to tell me whether you're B2 or C1 or whatever, just which languages do you speak?
I like to say that I speak languages at a D1 level, just to completely surpass that scale and just show people that it's kind of nonsense in a way. But so I'd say I'm D1 in French, Spanish, Russian, Arabic, and then I've studied a bunch of others, flirted with Portuguese and Danish and stuff. But I also, a big part of me is that I don't like to claim that I speak languages, because people get so worried about that. On the definition of fluency, can I say I speak this? And I like to surpass that and say, have fun with it. So.
Now, I agree with him that this framework generally for most people is not important, but I base most of my investigation videos off of it because when it comes to selling material related to languages such as courses and mentorship and stuff, that's when it becomes important. But for the general person who's learning languages for fun, it's really not that important. But let's see what he means by a D1 level, because he actually defines D1 elsewhere.
Final language learning level is D1, which is where you can speak the language without even opening your mouth. You can make objects move by just thinking of their name in the language, and you can cause even French people to spontaneously combust out of excitement when you speak their language. The only person known to achieve a D1 level in a language without cheating is the great Wouter Kortewener. However, there is a new glitch that was discovered by the American James Joseph Dresnock in 1962 when he defected to North Korea. Rumors state that upon crossing the border, he instantly acquired D1 North Korean Korean.
Okay, well, we all know about Wouter because I've already done an investigation of him. If you want to watch that, I'll probably put a link in the description, but let's continue. So based on that, I've had to update the Common European Framework to account for these new unknown levels to me previously. So now we have D1, and then naturally we would have a D2, because it would just be kind of weird to leave D1 without a D2. But D1 is defined as make objects move by thinking about their name in the language, make French people happy. I didn't know it was that difficult to make French people happy. I'm glad I'm not learning French. Okay, and D2 is Well, we'll just leave D2 there as it is. So now, let's put his languages on the framework. So under D1, we have French, Spanish, Russian, Arabic, and then hanging off to the side, undefined at this stage, we have American, Portuguese, Danish, German, Hindi, Urdu, Tokipona, and Vietnamese. Now, straight up for American, he does speak it. It's basically just a bad version of Australian English, but he definitely does speak it and he's a native speaker. So we will move on to his next language, which will be French. Now, for French, we did not have enough material available, so I reached out to the Language Simp and I organized an interview. If you want to see the full interview, which is much longer than the tiny clip you'll see here, it will be linked in the attached document.
Et dans tes vidéos aussi, t'as beaucoup de rap de gaming et tout ça, non?
C'est vrai, je crois que l'humeur c'est un peu basé sur les blagues qui se font dans la communauté de gaming, je crois un peu, dans les MMO, mais aussi sur Call of Duty. J'ai beaucoup joué à Call of Duty dans le passé, et donc ça m'a beaucoup aidé au niveau de genre les blagues, les vidéos que des gens font sur les jeux vidéo. Je crois que c'est un peu, et j'utilise les mêmes termes que j'utilise dans leurs vidéos, et je crois que ça m'aide beaucoup à être différent, parce que la plupart des youtubeurs polyglottes entre guillemets, ils font des vidéos sur comment apprendre une langue, je sais pas, comment utiliser cette application pour apprendre une langue, un polyglotte qui montre leur capacité de parler beaucoup de langues, etc. Mais pour moi, c'est quelque chose de différent et je crois que ça, c'est la raison pour laquelle j'ai du succès là-dessus.
So, as you can see right here, we have many French reviews. Now I'm just going to zoom in and we're going to check out a couple of these reviews. Overall, I think he's around a high B2. He talks with remarkable fluency and ease of expression, without much sign of having to restrict what he wants to say. B2+. He can give detailed descriptions addressing all the questions and conversation topics that came up, giving examples and details. He used specific terminology related to video making and YouTube. He has a couple of vocab issues here and there, so I'd say he's a B2 in vocab. His grammar is great. He has some occasional slips, but he corrects many of them immediately. He's a well-rounded B2 speaker. In light of the French interview, it's clear that he's dedicated years to reaching the level of fluency. He expresses himself seamlessly, never needing to search for words. His vocabulary is diverse, allowing him to cover a variety of general topics. I have very little to criticize here about Language Simp in French. I believe I am a low C1 and I live in Quebec, where I grew up and speak in French every day in my daily life, and his skills in French are easily as good as mine. He clearly has a large vocabulary in French and clearly is very confident speaking in it. He never has any trouble understanding the interviewer and his accent is surprisingly good. I understood him perfectly despite the fact I was only listening to the audio and not watching the video or using subtitles. This person says, generally speaking, it's easy to tell he feels very comfortable speaking French. There seems to be no hesitance from his side during the interview. I was certified DELF B2 in 2020. I didn't use French a lot, so I degraded. That's why I state that my French is a B1, and I feel like he speaks a lot better than me. This person says here, oral production. He clearly meets a B2 criteria with sufficient range of language to give clear descriptions, express viewpoints, and general topics. He talks about his entire language learning journey and cultural differences. Overall, it was an enjoyable conversation that I could easily follow, and I was pleasantly impressed, and not just because of our shared plot for world domination. Can I get in on that one? Okay, so I've pushed his French down to a C1 range, although some people were saying it's probably a B2, so it's anywhere around a B to a C1, but just to be on the safe side, I'm gonna say it's a C1. Next up, Spanish.
No es mi caso, pero la verdad es que tengo problemas con mis ojos. O sea, mis ojos no funcionan. O sea, soy, creo que la palabra, ciego. Soy ciego en uno de mis ojos. Y también me duelen los ojos cuando trato de leer en general, sobre todo cuando trato de leer en alfabetos diferentes. O sea, el alfabeto ruso, los caracteres de chino mandarín, por ejemplo. Entonces, a la hora de elegir un nuevo idioma para aprender, la dificultad no se encuentra en las cosas normales de un idioma difícil, como los tonos o la gramática. Para mí es algo más con mis ojos. O sea, el alfabeto del idioma vietnamita es el alfabeto latino, ¿no? Entonces sería muy fácil para mí. Y también podemos ver los tonos en el alfabeto mismo.
Now, for those who have watched my previous investigations, you might have noticed or recognized the interviewer here. That is Patrick Lancaster. I actually did an investigation on him. A phenomenal hyperpolyglot. You guys should totally go check out that video and also sub to his channel. So I'll be putting a link in the description for that as well. Okay, so this person said, overall, I would say he has a very solid B2 level, and I would say he definitely has achieved basic fluency in the language. However, he does use the same simple grammatical structures quite frequently and lacks the command to express a level of nuance that would suggest a C1 level. His command of those simple structures is quite strong and actually has a pretty solid command of the basic grammar patterns in the language, which has been pretty rare in these reviews. Language Simp Spanish is leaning on the C1 side, but I'm rating him a B2 because of the following reasons. He admits that he does not find the usage of Spanish as important during his daily activities. He was honest when he couldn't remember certain words or how to explain something specific, like being robbed in France, but he was dynamic with his Spanish skills, explaining his limitations. Language Simp did all of this in Spanish, which I admire. Language Simp communicates very well in Spanish. He shows no fear using it, and his interview covered a wide enough range of subjects. He also uses well-structured expressions common among native speakers. Again, I rated him B2 because of the acknowledgement of his own limitations, and it is clear he will have difficulty discussing certain subjects in more detail. Now, this is from the interviewer himself, Patrick. Based on my observation, I believe he would pass a C1 level exam with a bit of targeted preparation. While some of his vocabulary may be somewhat dormant due to a lack of regular active use, he demonstrates strong command of grammatical structures and communicates comfortably on a wide range of topics without prior preparation. So based on that, I pushed his Spanish down to a B2 range, but as stated, with a little bit of preparation, he could probably crack that C1. So next up is Russian, and again, we did an interview with him, but also, he's actually stopped learning this language. So we're probably not seeing him at his best.
Почему ты перестал работать инженером?
Потому что, я хотел работать ютубером. У меня свой канал и...
То есть
вот, да.
Не только из-за зрения? Не только из-за зрения, но это легче для меня работать ютубером сейчас, потому что я снимаю видео. Это правда, что я пишу скрипт, понимаешь, скрипты на английском, чтобы говорить о языках на канале. Сценарий, да.
Но, да, точно,
да.
Я не знал слова.
Scripts are for programmers, скрипты программисты пишут.
Понятно, прости.
Есть такое слово, да. Я занимаюсь разработкой игр, у нас скрипты пишут.
Понятно.
В компьютерных играх, в программах.
Вау. Это было кошмар для меня делать это. Мне нужно, как сказать, in the past tense, я даже не знал. Но да, это сложнее для меня.
Now, first up, from the interviewer themselves, my assessment did not really change. They're talking between the pre-interview and post-interview. I think he is around an A2, A2 plus in oral production interaction. We were talking on rather mundane and familiar topics like his job, education, language learning, his life travels, his eye problems, and what he watches. However, I regularly made attempts to stray off that trajectory, at which point it would become apparent that he can only say very simple things on those more complicated topics. Now, can handle very short exchanges, but rarely can understand enough to keep the conversation going is not quite about him. Yes, our conversation was primarily driven by my initiative, but he did almost always understand me. I think so, except a couple of times. So understand the main point made is clear in standard language. B1 applies pretty well, maybe even more than that. But our topics were not that complicated overall. When I retold him what I remembered of a Brazilian show my mum had watched, he asked whether she had watched it in Portuguese with subtitles. He did not have to ask that. All of that does look like features of the level above are starting to appear. I think his B1 comprehension and his former practice with Russian let him punch above his weight. His confident command is mostly A2. He's not very slow to find words and can try expressing something more complicated if given time to remember, but he will generally have to compromise the message. That means that his pragmatic expression is about an A2. After all, expressing much of what he wants is beyond his reach when the conversation requires storytelling. This person says, in my opinion, speaking-wise, Language Simp is still hanging on to the lower end of a B1, though I can also see an argument for him being between an A2 and a B1, as there are some B1 skills we do not see him showcase. As demonstrated by the interview, he's able to participate in somewhat extended conversations with a native speaker as long as they are willing to accommodate him. While his vocabulary range is somewhat lacking, his grammatical repertoire is broader than what would be expected for an A2 speaker, and he is able to link simple phrases into connected speech, even though we can see some evident pausing to organize the language. So, his Russian is somewhere between a strong A2 and a B1, so to be safe, I've put him at the B1 range. So next up is Arabic, and this is a language that he has actually stopped learning.
السلام عليكم أنا اسمي Language Simp وأنا بتعلم العربي دلوقتي العربية المصرية علشان أنا بحب مصر أنا نفسي أزور مصر بس دلوقتي أنا can't أزور مصر. I don't know how to negate sentences yet. أنا كلب كل خرا يو كل خرا أنت كل خرا. أنا عندي فلوس كتير علشان أنا من الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. I did that one really bad. الولايات المتحدة. I'm doing it too harsh. المتحدة. Was that bad? المتحدة. الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. عين. قا. 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 عين. Dude, that قا was really weak. Wait one sec. قا.
Now, overall, the estimate about his Arabic is that maybe it's an A1, but we just don't have enough evidence. I did actually ask to interview him for it, and he said his language skills are too weak in it, so he doesn't want to do an interview, and I was like, that's perfectly fine. So his Arabic drops down to an A1 level, but it might not even be that realistically. Next up, Portuguese.
Quando trabalhei com gente do Brasil, faz muitos anos, eu queria falar em português, eu queria aprender a língua. Eu acho que não sei muito, eu acho que o português brasileiro é muito fofinho. É muito fofinho. E também eu nunca falei português, mas no passado eu falei sempre no YouTube, eu falei sempre o Bolsonaro é muito gostoso. E os brasileiros falavam, não, por que você fala isso? Não fala isso, cara, o que você está fazendo? Foi muito engraçado.
So first up, we're going to read from the actual interviewer himself. Again, Patrick, great guy, check out his YouTube channel. What we observe in the interview seems to be more a case of language interference than a lack of knowledge. He clearly has the structures and vocabulary stored in his mind, but when he tries to access them, Spanish, a language in which he's clearly more proficient, tends to interfere. This is especially noticeable because he used Portuguese right after speaking Spanish, which increases cross-linguistic interference when the speaker is not highly fluent in both languages. That said, he's capable of communicating and holding a conversation in Portuguese with some effort. So if he were to take the exam, he would be a B1 assessment without major issues. Given his strong background in both French and Spanish, he has the potential to reach B2 more quickly than average once he dedicates focused time to the language. His Portuguese appears rusty and heavily influenced by Spanish, but there is no reasonable justification to rate him below a B1. Now, this person over here said during the review he made a few common mistakes that are common for people whose native language isn't Portuguese or Spanish, like conjugating the verbs and words to the proper gender and plurality, but I was surprised when I was able to count the amount of those mistakes in the whole interview in one hand. I cannot give him a B2 because he did struggle a bit while trying to express his thoughts due to missing vocabulary. Due to that, I do believe that he is in the B1 to B2 grind where you just need a ton of new words and specific vocabulary that is used once in a while. So based on this, his Portuguese is somewhere between a B1 and a B2. Now, Patrick gave him a B2, he's the interviewer, but pretty much everyone else gave him a B1, so I've kind of pushed him down to a B1 range. Next up, Danish.
Hej, mit navn er Language Simp. Jeg lærer dansk, fordi jeg kan rigtig godt lide at lære sprog. Jeg elsker det danske udtaler. For eksempel, jeg kan ikke sige rødgrød med flød, men jeg vil flytte til Danmark, fordi jeg vil spise rødgrød med flød i Danmark med mange danske mennesker. Kan du forstå mig, hvis du er dansk?
Obviously, we did not have much to go on there, but his skills are somewhere around an A1 to an A2. His pronunciation is actually not that bad, although a clear American accent, but the video evidence is limited, and all his Danish content is very basic. In the short video I linked, he mainly touches upon common polyglot topics, and clearly has set phrases, talking points that he has memorized, and doesn't seem to go much further than that. So Danish is somewhere around the A1 to A2 range. I've kind of slapped it halfway between the two at the moment. Now next up is German, and we actually did an interview with him in German, but unfortunately the recording software didn't capture his voice, and now we just have to rely on the interviewer, what they said about his German. If you don't believe me, here's a tiny little piece from that interview where you can clearly see it didn't capture his voice. And this is what the interviewer said. I messed up the recording, therefore I'm really sorry to the community and to you, Language Simp, because I think you did really well. I tested the recordings beforehand and everything was working fine, but it ended only recording my voice. Again, I'm so sorry, and I will review the language level now right after the interview, and I took some notes during the interview as well. And as you can see, this is their notes right there, and they say, right down here, therefore, I would consider him as an intermediate independent user of the German language and would give him a good B1 level on oral production and a B2 level on comprehension even. Again, I am sorry for messing up the recording. So his German has been placed around a B1 level. Now the next one is Hindi or Urdu, and we actually do have a recording of him speaking this language, but we didn't have any reviewers. So if you speak this language and you want to review him, drop it in the comments below.
नमस्कार, मेरा नाम लैंग्वेज सिंप है और मैं हाइपर पॉलीग्लॉट गिगाचाद अल्फा मेल हूँ। मेरी उम्र 24 साल है और मैं अमेरिका से हूँ। मैं हिंदी सीख रहा हूँ क्योंकि मुझे लगता है कि मोदी साहब से बहुत सुंदर है और मैं भारत जाना चाहता हूँ और मैं New Delhi? How do you say New Delhi? Is there a word for that? मैं मदरचोद हूँ.
Now, we didn't really have any reviewers or content realistically for Hindi and Urdu or Tokipona, so I will be jumping past these ones, and now we're going to look at his last language, which is Vietnamese.
Because I'm scared. I don't know what I'm going to say next. I guess I'll talk about the language. Oh, yeah. Fun. Ho nhát. Qua. Tiếng Việt. Là. Tang. Zo. Ví dụ. Tôi không thể nói dấu hỏi. Không thể nói dấu hỏi. I just said it. Why can't I say it again? I'm an idiot. Fortnite.
One thing I do love about that is how he's actually using his hands to kind of like mentally remind himself of the tones, like in what direction they should go. That's kind of cool use of the body in order to remember things. Now, the Vietnamese reviewers were everything from pre-A1 up to A2. I'm pretty sure the person who gave him an A2 level was just being way too kind, at least based on the public content I've seen. So let's have a look. I have watched two videos. The first video is him speaking Vietnamese at length after only 2 weeks of study. While it is quite impressive that he seems like he gets a lot of the tones correct and for the most part grammar correct in the sentences that he speaks, despite the blindfold, it does seem rehearsed and not off the cuff. But this is expected from someone who has only spoken the language for 2 weeks. While Simp's approach to learning spicy Chinese is impressive, unfortunately he's closer to ranch sauce side of the spice spectrum. His learning primarily focuses on input, where he watches intermediate level presenters with subtitles that he reads out loud, and then he uses Google Translate to identify vocabulary and uses it to model pronunciation. So his Vietnamese is anywhere from pre-A1 up to A2. Now that we've finished with all these languages, I'm going to clean up this board so we can see the final outcome. So we've reached the end of this investigation. We have the final outcome right here on the screen. And as you can see, there is nothing left in the goddamn D1 territory. I was really hoping that I would see some objects like floating in the air just by the mere mention of their names, or specifically, and I organized this for this, to see French people really happy. Now, he actually said in the D1 that they would spontaneously combust with happiness. So when I organized a French reviewer, I was kind of hoping to see them just catch fire during the interview, because that would have proven to me that we actually had a D1 level here. Now, obviously, when I spoke to my French reviewer, I did not tell them that this was my expectation, but, you know, it worked out nicely in the end for everyone involved, I guess. No one caught fire. Here's the thing. He doesn't actually make any realistic claims about his abilities anywhere, and in fact, he openly says that we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be making these types of claims. Now, he has his different reasons for doing it, but again, he's not overselling his abilities, and he even says in his book that we should undersell our abilities, which worked out quite nicely for me, because when I went into this, when I started this investigation, I actually didn't think he spoke realistically any languages to a high level, because I thought he was just a meme channel, you know, someone who made funny videos about language learning, and then maybe he was learning some languages on the side or one language on the side. I did not expect him to be learning this many languages and to actually have, you know, good control of at least French and Spanish. Like, that surprises me. The dude is more of I guess a polyglot than some of the self-professed polyglots out there, the ones who are selling actual courses and claiming fluency. So this is a nice surprise overall, and therefore, in my mind, Language Simp is in no way whatsoever a fraud. He's highly trustworthy, he's a down-to-earth guy, and he seems to be trying to actually bring some realism to the language learning space. So 2 thumbs up for him, I guess. If I had more thumbs, I'd stick them up, but you're only getting 2, okay? Be happy with that. Now, next up, let's see who can reach a D2 level. If there's anyone you think out there who can reach a D2 level in their languages, just let me know in the comment section below, and we will start an investigation. I'll see you all in the next video. And if you're not there, well then you may be the one who spontaneously combusts.